promoting dialogue.
It's midday in Dakar, 1 o'clock in Praia. Good afternoon, and many thanks for staying tuned to West Africa Democracy Radio, broadcasting on 94.9 FM and worldwide on wadr.org. Welcome to Newslink, and here are the top stories. Nigerian junta leader General Chani refuses to receive Benin's President Talon's emissary as diplomatic rift heightens.
Benin will continue to play its role in bilateral relations, but also in the obligations that are ours.
Senegal's President Diomaye Faye is in Burkina Faso as part of his West African tour since he was inaugurated. UNICEF raises alarm over increase in the violence against children by 70% across the Sahel. And a food crisis looms in northern Nigeria as prices of tomatoes and peppers skyrocket.
The situation is greatly affecting our business because people can no longer afford it. It is quite expensive. We are really in a difficult situation.
Please stay tuned for details of these stories and more.
Here is Imo Edit with Newslink.
Many thanks for joining us, and a warm welcome to our listeners in the Gambia, Ghana, Liberia, and Sierra Leone. Nigerian transitional leader General Abdurrahman Chani refused to receive a delegation sent by President Patrice Talon, according to the Beninese Minister of Mines. The delegation was in Niamey for a two-day working visit in order to find a way out of the export of Nigerian oil via the Beninese coast, compromised by the diplomatic quarrel between the two countries. Addressing the media on Wednesday, Benin's Mine Minister Samu Seydou Adambi said the general's refusal to meet Talon's representatives further complicates the diplomatic rift.
Benin will continue to play its role in bilateral relations, but also in the obligations that are ours in relation to the Niger pipeline project. I was also carrying a message from President Talon to his counterpart and brother, General Abdurrahman Chani, who was unable to receive me to take this message.
Recall, Niger inaugurated in November a giant oil pipeline which should allow the transport to Benin of crude oil extract from the Agadem deposit by the China National Petroleum Corporation, an oil company belonging to the Chinese state. In Burkina Faso, the Sense movement says Guy Have Kam, who was released on Wednesday evening, has been readopted in front of his home by men presenting themselves as security forces. The Sense movement, of which he is the coordinator, has called for his immediate and unconditional release. Guy Have Kam was arrested on the night of January 24 to 25 by agents presenting themselves as security forces at Ouagadougou International Airport while he was returning from a trip. The court had since ordered his release not until Wednesday night. His group Sense movement is demanding his immediate and unconditional release and an end to these practices described as being from another age. Well, back in Senegal, President Diomaye Faye today embarks on the working and friendship visit to Ouagadougou. He is due to meet the President of Burkina Faso, Captain Brian Traoré. After Burkina Faso, Bashir Diomaye Faye will travel to neighboring Mali. Since his election 2 months ago, Senegal's new president has embarked on a West African tour. Well, let's join Abdullah Hassan for the details.
Bassirou Diomaye Faye's trip to Burkina Faso and Mali come against the backdrop of the announced withdrawal of these two countries from ECOWAS in January 2025. The Senegalese head of state, who is attached to Pan-Africanist values and advocates African integration, especially in West Africa, is keen to convince Ouagadougou and Bamako not to leave the sub-regional organization. Mustafa Diouf is a specialist in integration law.
Senegal,
with its well-known leadership, cannot, in a similar context, not try to apply pressure for the return of the states that have withdrawn from ECOWAS, because it is an association that only gains when it is strengthened by its members. Now, are the others ready to come back? Are the necessary elements put in place for them to come back? I don't think they will be back for now, but they have to do their best to invite the countries that have been withdrawn to come back. But naturally, it will be on basis that may not be in line with their interests.
Bassirou Diomaye Faye would also anticipate a failure of his good office mission and prepare the future of relations between his country and Burkina Faso and Mali should these states definitely leave ECOWAS. Mustafa Diouf explains.
It's not because a country has left an integration organization that automatically is bilateral, meaning personal relations with each of the countries are broken. So, in my opinion, at this level, it may be that they can be scratched a little but won't disappear.
It should be noted that these countries have considerable trade links and are much visited by their various nationals.
Abdullah Hassan reporting there. Now to the Gambia, where the government is set to reintroduce the draft constitution as discussions over the process heightens. This comes as Cabinet dedicated the last 3 days to meeting on the next steps forward. It will be recalled that the draft constitution was rejected at the scrutiny stage when it was previously tabled. Sankli Janko has more details.
The Barrow-led government is expected to conclude a 3-day meeting today, Thursday, on the next steps to be taken. The government aims to reintroduce the draft constitution before the National Assembly. The Attorney General and Minister of Justice, Dara Ejalo, recently informed the gathering on the government's latest steps with regards to the constitutional process.
The draft constitution process has begun. The cabinet is sitting on the draft constitution. The bill has been drafted, so we are considering the bill. 3 days have been put aside for the draft constitution. Immediately after that, it will be gazetted. We're hoping to gazette the draft constitution once again, somewhere before middle of June.
According to the Attorney General, the government intends to table the draft constitution for consideration soonest.
We will be introducing the draft constitution, hopefully not your this session coming, but your next session. The draft constitution will be before you for consideration.
The draft constitution was perceived to be very popular among the general population following what the Constitutional Council described as a thorough public consultations. However, it was rejected at the scrutiny stage of the second reading by the National Assembly members of the 5th Legislature in September 2020. In his 2024 New Year message, President Adama Barrow indicated that reintroducing the draft constitution was one of the 3 major tasks of the government, 2 of which, the OIC Summit and the Janjambure Bicentenary, have been accomplished. It remains to be seen what steps the government will take following the cabinet meeting on the draft constitution. For Newslink and West Africa Democrats Radio, I am Sankuli Jenko reporting from Banjul.
More stories coming up on West Africa Democracy Radio. Newslink continues.
The main press union of Guinea says hundreds of jobs have been lost following the ban on 4 radio stations and 2 television channels by the military authorities in place. The ban on the 6 radio and TV stations is the latest in a series of measures taken by the military in power since it appeared on the scene in 2021. As an immediate measure, the union is considering embarking on a general strike across the country. The Union of Press Professionals of Guinea, SPPG, announced last week its intention to launch an unlimited strike in a context that is already socially and politically tense. In a letter addressed to the National Confederation of Workers of Guinea, the main country trade union force has asked for the support of all trade unions. On May 22, the Guinean military leadership withdrew the licenses of 4 radio and 2 television stations from the country's private media. Now to some news from UNICEF, as a new report shows that violations against children increased by 70% in the Sahel countries in the last quarter of 2023. This was established by UNICEF, the United Nations Children's Agency. The UN body has castigated and has called on the parties involved in the security crisis to stop all forms of violence, murder, and child abuse. Well, here are more details with Ogebi Erika.
According to UNICEF, the majority of cases of violence are related to the recruitment and use of children in armed conflict. Gilles Fagnino, UNICEF Regional Director for West and Central Africa, said between October and December 2023, the killings and mutilations of children increased by more than 130% compared to the previous quarter. The UN body also indicates that nearly 1,400 people were killed during violent incidents in the Central Sahel during the first quarter of 2024, a figure which also sees an increase of 66% compared to the same quarter last year. To deal with this worrying situation, the UN organization is calling for better protection of civilians against violence. In its press release, UNICEF insists on the protection of children to enable them to realize their fundamental right to life in accordance with the United Nations Convention. Gilles Fagninu also calls for respect for international law. The regional director for West and Central Africa therefore invites the parties involved in the security crisis in the Central Sahel to put an end to violence, mothers and child abuse.
Al-Gabirka filed that report to Liberia now as land conflicts are said to be widespread in the country, despite the nation's enacting a law making the double sale of land criminal. As you will hear in this report by our correspondent in Popa, conflicts associated with the double sale of land occur daily across the country and in many senses led to the destruction of properties and the killing of some Liberians.
The latest conflict associated with land occurred in the Wako community outside Monrovia, leaving several properties destroyed and many victims sustaining injuries. In this interview with WADR, these victims narrated how they became the latest victims of double sale of land.
Demolishing people's houses, asking people to rebuy without deed or give you receipt. Then which means my deed I got from Moses Ward or from Thomas Richard Walker is still value. So if I buy something for you, you gave me deed, you gave me deed, but not receipt. And you kill the people in the process. They chopped one boy to death. One more they broke her horse down until she went mad and she died the next day. All the frustration. But they got to can present people. You don't even go to court. How will I get land? It says from Samuel Milton. You don't know Samuel Milton. How would I get my cornerstone in the four corner of my land? They don't know the first existing cornerstone. I will know.
Meanwhile, in an attempt to create more awareness among the population, the country has organized a multi-actors platform on land governance and responsible agricultural investment in Liberia. Speaking at the conference, the Executive Director of Rest and Rest Foundation, James Yasia, called on all actors involved with land issues to be more vigilant and accelerate awareness across the country. Despite the push for massive awareness, the institution responsible for handling all land matters, the Liberia Land Authority, says the lack of resources is grossly undermining the operation of the entity. Now, stakeholders are calling for a holistic enforcement of the law criminalizing double sale of land to de-escalate conflicts associated with land. For Newslink on West Africa Democracy Radio, I'm Darlington Pogba in Monrovia.
You're listening to Newslink on West Africa Democracy Radio 94.9 FM Dakar, Senegal. Here is a reminder of our top stories. Nigerian junta leader General Chani refuses to receive Benin's President Talon's emissary as diplomatic rift heightens. Senegal's President Diomaye Faye is in Burkina Faso as part of his West African tour since he was inaugurated. UNICEF raises alarm over increase in violence against children by 70% across the Sahel. And still ahead in the news, a food crisis looms in northern Nigeria as prices of tomatoes and pepper skyrocket. We also have the press review, a guest interview, and sports news. Please stay with us.
West Africa Democracy Radio. It's you speaking.
Well, let's remind you that we are streaming live on WADR.org, YouTube, and Facebook. Now let's take you to Nigeria, where a possible crisis is brewing in Abuja and other northern states, as sellers of tomatoes, peppers, and other perishable goods lament scarcity and exorbitant price hikes. The situation has left many struggling to make ends meet, with some sellers attributing the crisis to the removal of fuel subsidies and the resultant high inflation. Usman Mara tells us more in this report.
A basket of tomatoes once sold for 3,000 naira last week now costs a staggering 26,000 naira a price many consumers cannot afford. Sellers who rely solely on the sale of these perishable items to feed their families are feeling the pinch.
The situation is greatly affecting our business because people can no longer afford it. It is quite expensive. We are really in a difficult situation. This is where we source money for food, clothing, and other expenses. But today, the market is not flourishing.
I used to sell tomatoes like basically every day, but now a lot of people cannot afford the price of the tomatoes because tomatoes now has gone really up.
The price is high because the commodity is scarce even on the farms. The scarcity has significantly impacted the lives of small-scale traders.
Buyers at Utako Market, one of Abuja's largest markets, share the same concerns.
The last time I came here wasn't even long ago, and it's like the price has tripled, and it's crazy because I mean the one I even bought last time was more than this for a cheaper price, but all of a sudden it's even lesser for a higher price. So I'm still contemplating whether should I buy or should I not buy.
Well, unfortunately, it's actually alarming because the produce are not available, the prices are very high, and it's really difficult for everybody, both the sellers and we, the buyer. We're not seeing the produce. We don't know if it's the government or the farmers. We really don't know, but we're really at loss, and it's really difficult for us.
As the situation continues to worsen, sellers and buyers alike are calling on the government to take immediate actions to address the scarcity and soaring prices of tomatoes, peppers, and other essential commodities. For Newslink on West Africa Democracy Radio, Usman Umar reporting from Abuja.
The Economic Community of West African States, ECOWAS, turns 49 with a call for unity among member states in a fight against insecurity. But how exactly will the sub-regional institution champion this goal that has been reiterated by the Commission, the President, Dr. Omar Aliyu Toure? Regional experts and citizens alike have argued that little of ECOWAS Vision 2020 was felt in areas such as governance, rule of law, trade, and even the free movement of goods and people. Cognizant of some operational lapses, ECOWAS says it will improve on the implementation of Vision 2050, which is the subject of this report by Nadine Tete.
The ECOWAS Vision 2050 is anchored on 5 principal pillars, which the Commission says embodies the mandates of the first roadmap, but which will be segmented. The segmentation should help in effective monitoring, tracking, and evaluation. The first of the pillars is peace, security, and stability, which aims to make ECOWAS a secure, stable, and peaceful region, bearing in mind the multidimensional security threats facing the region. Governance and rule of law is a second pillar. ECOWAS intends to build a region that guarantees respect for fundamental rights and freedoms, while delivering the third mandate, economic integration and interconnectivity. By this, the regional institution aims to deepen the process of economic integration, not only through free movement of people and goods, but also through the enhancement of trade and market integration, managing and coordinating the sub-region's resource sets on the fourth pillar, which is transformation, inclusiveness, and sustainable development. ECOWAS believes that the use of its human potential and natural resources to improve the well-being of its citizens will further position the region on the global competitive stage. These include improving education and knowledge-building systems, the creation of decent jobs for young people and women, as well as the strengthening of the public sector. The fifth and last pillar, social inclusion, prioritizes ECOWAS citizens, mainly women, children, and youth, and all vulnerable people, including people with disabilities and the elderly, are the heart of development and the integration process. For WADR, Nadiri Tete, Accra.
Now let's talk about the ongoing general meetings of the African Development Bank, which will come to an end tomorrow, Friday. The theme for this year's meeting is the transformation of Africa, the African Development Bank Group, and the reform of the global financial architecture. More than 3,000 participants from 82 countries have gathered in Nairobi, the capital of Kenya. The FDB is seeking financing for the achievement of the sustainable goals in Africa. Chatisu explains further.
Akinwumi Adesina, the president of the African Development Bank, during a speech yesterday Wednesday, called for a reform of the global financial architecture. He said this will help Africa achieve the SDGs by 2030. Currently facing financial problems, the AFDB is introducing several innovations. For example, last month, the institution issued a capital of $750 million on the global market to increase its lending capacity. To resolve its financial problems, the AFDB has increased partnerships to support the financing of activities of African women and young people. During his speech, Akinwumi Adesina also focused on the fight against climate change, indicating that $25 billion will be mobilized by the AFDB in green financing. The 59 general meetings of the African Development Bank will also study strategies to finance gas projects while aiming to preserve the environment.
A justice filed that report.
This is the newspaper review. Stay abreast and find out what the top stories are in your country.
This is the newspaper review.
The newspaper review.
Well, let's head back to Accra as we join Nadide today for the newspaper review.
Greetings and you're welcome to the newspaper review segment with me, Nadidi Tete. Let's find out what the dailies are reporting in Ghana, the front page of the major newspaper in the country, the Daily Graphic newspaper. More cancer treatment centers needed. That's according to an oncologist. Also here on the front page, government votes 700 million Ghana cedis for book and research allowances since 2020. And I'll review Labour Acts to protect workers. That's according to the Vice President and flag bearer of the NPP, Dr. Mahmoud Bawumia. The final headline on the front page of the Daily Graphic newspaper, Ghana card as sole identification. Political parties give EC green light to lay new bill. Now to the Ghanaian Times newspaper. Front page, National Entrepreneurship and Innovation Program, NEIP, creates 103,871 jobs from 2017 to 2023. That's according to President Akufo-Addo, and he was speaking in relation to advancing entrepreneurship and innovation. Also here on the front page of the Ghanaian Times newspaper, first batch of pilgrims from Tamale arrive in Jeddah. That's it for the Ghanaian Times newspaper. Now to the Chronicle newspaper. Front page, Mahama's name pops up in Attorney General Godfrey Wadami's tape saga. And also here on the front page, Akufo-Addo's government wants to imprison Atufosun for unjust reason. That's according to the national chairman of the opposition party, the National Democratic Congress. And the Minister for Housing, Kojo Nkrumah, has directed contractors to observe safety protocols. Now to the Crusading Guide newspaper. Front page, Trades Union Congress lauds Bawumia's vision to transform Ghana with ideas and systems and institutions. Also here on the front page, Foreign Ministry debunks Ablakwe's Oslo Chancery allegations. And the final one here, Dr. Mahmoud Bawumia is poised for victory. That's it for the New Crusading Guide newspaper. The Daily Statesman front page, we are committed to STEM education. Akufo-Addo touts progress in the sector, and TUC welcomes Bawumia's private sector vision. And finally, fuel tanker drivers laud NPA for leading discussion on conditions of service. And that'll be it for the dailies. From Accra, Ghana, my name is Nadidi Tete. It's back to you.
Many thanks, Nadidi Tete, for the newspaper review.
Politics, analyses on major news, social matters, and all. This is A Guest.
Well, this segment today, we look at the imminent crisis brewing in Abuja and other northern states of Nigeria as sellers of tomatoes, peppers, and other perishable goods lament scarcity and exorbitant price hikes. Well, as you heard in our report earlier, the situation has left many struggling to make ends meet, with some sellers attributing the crisis to the removal of fuel subsidies and the resultant high inflation. Now, Nigeria's Minister of Agriculture, Senator Abubakar Kyari, in a bid to calm the tension, said that a severe infestation of the tomato crop is the reason for the scarcity and elevated prices of the essential commodity in the country. However, experts like Afioluwa Mogaji says there's more to the minister's response. Well, according to him, the sector is missing the basics.
Yes, we're missing quite a lot. An understanding of how the sector works. You know, there's theory, there's practical. And over the years, maybe in the last two administrations, we've not been able to actually plug it in. And what we really see is we have square pegs in round holes. That's bottom line. And a lot of beautiful ideas that we need to adapt before we implement. So, it's always that information. In agric in Nigeria, you see government throw money at agriculture instead of investing in information. So that's things. We don't have the right information, and the right information comes from players, not from people who have degrees. And that's where we have a lot of challenge. And we focus on the wrong things. Okay, so take for instance now, about 8 months ago, the administration did come out with the food security challenge when they spoke about the state of emergency on food. And in that statement then, they did say that availability was not a challenge, it was affordability.
Well, Ms. Mogaji, let me quickly ask here, what do you think is responsible for this scarcity and the hike in prices of tomatoes and these cuts across the country?
Yes, a basket of tomatoes is likely to hit between 80,000 to 120,000. Why? Because climate change and also cost of production. In the north now, we're having reduced food supply, and so that's what warranted one of the governors to say we won't take food, So around this time every year, May, June, there's generally a shortage of tomatoes, fresh corn and co across the country. The northerners use irrigation and they use government irrigation. They stop the waters around March. Okay, so they don't have enough water and prepare to grow rice because the lands they use is like fish pond. So the waters can't flow out and it destroys things like vegetables. Now, the Southwest or the South generally have not leveraged the opportunity of the lands they have and some irrigation facilities. So there's always a major shock in May, June.
Afilullah Mogaji is an African farmer. There is Sport News with Sankuli Janko.
Hello there, welcome and thank you for joining us. Libya's Al Ahly Benghazi and Angola's Petro de Luanda will contest the final of the 2024 Basketball Africa League Ball on Saturday, June 1, after beating Nigeria's Rivers Hoopers and South Africa's Cape Town Tigers respectively on Wednesday, according to media reports. Nigeria's Rivers Hoopers fought till the end, but it was not enough as Al Ahly Benghazi edged the West Africans 89-83 to win the semi-final. The Libyan side went into the break leading the second quarter 48-37 at halftime. Rivers Hoopers made a great comeback in the second half and took the match right back, forcing it to overtime, tied at 73-73. However, the experience of Al Ahly Benghazi senior players enabled them to see out the game as they saw out an 89-83 win to book their final berth as reported. Meanwhile, in the other semi-final, Angolan Petro overcame South Africa's Cape Town Tigers following a 96-86 final results to book place in the final of Ball 2024. And that's it for sports. It's back to you.
We've come to the end of this edition of Newslink from West Africa Democracy Radio, broadcasting from Dakar, Senegal. Thank you for listening, and many thanks to Mustafa Sek and Maudu for the technical assistance. Let's keep the conversation coming on all of our social media platforms. Well, coming up at the bottom of the hour is our flagship environment program, Enviroscope with Abdullah Hassan, and this edition looks at the threat to wildlife despite conservative measures. I am Imo Edet. Good afternoon.
And many thanks to you for listening to Newslink via Hot 104.3 FM, New Me FM 94.0,
Hilltop Radio 104.7 FM,
and Veritas Radio 102.9 in Banjul, the Gambia. We also appreciate our listeners in Liberia via Alternative Youth Radio 98.9 FM, Lofa County.
Radio Kagama 94.5 FM, Nibe County, DCN Radio 91.3 FM, Riverside County, Wakat FM Radio, Banga, Liberia, Radio Gulf FM 91.3 Sierra Leone.
For you listening via Radio Pad 95.1 Damango, Savannah region, and on Royals FM 104.7 Wenchi, Ghana, we say a big thank you. Remember, West Africa Democracy Radio is all about you, your views, and your opinions.
For any cackle
giggle. Or babies laugh. Whatever the type of laughter.
WADR 94.9 FM is for you.
Is for you.
Imperatore della rumba congoliana, Ferigola. Et fuir toi-même est plus profitable que fuir le lion. Adolphe Mute Bachilamwina, Yangoyo.
WADR. You can listen to us on 94.9 FM in Dakar through our website www.wadr.org.
This is West Africa Democracy Radio, 94.9 FM Dakar.
The program you're about to listen to is a repeat broadcast.
Welcome to this week's episode of Enviroscope here on West Africa Democracy Radio, broadcasting from Dakar, Senegal, and online at wadr.org. And to you listening in the Gambia via Numi FM Banjul, in Nigeria on Albarka Radio, Bauchi State Northeast, in Ghana via Radio Pad 95.1, Damango Savannah region, and Baft FM Sierra Leone. Glad to have you join us on this package. Enviroscope is WADR's environment program that brings to the fore topical issues affecting the agricultural sector, land exploration, climate change, and every other matter that concerns our planet, Mother Earth. I am Abdullahi Hassan, your host, and today's edition is on wildlife. Wildlife refers to animals that are not tamed or domesticated. Domesticated animals are those which humans have tamed, kept in captivity, and bred for special purposes. The process of domestication takes place over a long period of time, through many generations, while preserving their natural habitat. But in recent decades, not just the process, but even the animals have been exposed to both human and artificially induced hazards, with hundreds of species near extinction. In talking about wildlife conservation, challenges and effective strategies in today's edition of the program, two experts, one from Côte d'Ivoire and the other from Senegal, both with separate interests yet under the same umbrella of conservation, will be joining us with their narratives. But first, the United Nations says wildlife crime is a threat to our health. According to the UN, the illegal wildlife trade is the fourth largest global organization. This crime also increases the risk of diseases transmitted between animals and humans by evading biosecurity and sanitary control. Imo Edet tells us more in this report.
The 2019 Global Assessment Report on Biodiversity and Ecosystem Services, published by the Intergovernmental Science Policy Platform on Biodiversity and Eco Services, says close to 1 million species, a quarter of all known life forms, could face extinction in a matter of decades as a direct result of human overexploitation, climate change, and habitat degradation. Continuing with the UN data articulated by the UNDP, the illegal trade in wildlife is often international, introducing transmission risk in every country it passes through.
Yvonne Higuero is the Secretary General of the Convention on the International Trade in Endangered Species of Wild Fauna and Flora sites.
Illegal wildlife trade has many negative consequences for human well-being and species conservation. When criminal actors trade in endangered species, they weaken entire ecosystems and they threaten essential links of the world's biological diversity. The World Economic Forum found that over half of the world's GDP is highly or moderately dependent on nature.
The world depends on ecosystems for clean air, water, food, medicine, climate regulation, and more. The UN says we need to take care of nature for it to take care of us. This means better regulating markets, making informed choices about what we buy and sell, and treating wildlife crime as a serious crime. To preserve and conserve wildlife, several organizations have and continue to advocate strategies to manage the ecosystems. These are habitat conservation, sustainable land use practices, research and monitoring, and public education and awareness. Others are creating wildlife areas, recycling, and tree planting.
A report by Imo Edet.
This is Enviroscope. Listen on Radio 94.9 FM and around the world on WADR.org.
Remember I told you earlier that 2 experts will be joining us? Yes, it's about time for our first guest, Ekun Konan, a researcher in animal biology at Peloforo Gonkulibale University in Korogo, north of Côte d'Ivoire. Conan says birds in that region of the country are increasingly exposed to the effects of climate crisis and are struggling to survive despite government measures. He explains.
Je pense que l'oiseau est une des espèces animales les plus connues.
I think that the bird is one of the most famous animal species, or let's say is part of the most famous animal category, because within the term bird, today on Earth, we have more than 11,000 species of birds that inhabit the Earth. The first particularity is that some animals have a covered body made of feathers. So currently, it's the only animal that wears feathers on its body. It also has a beak without teeth. It also has internal limbs that are transformed into wings that allow the bird to fly. In total, most species of birds can't fly, even if there are birds that are called rapids, which are birds that do not fly. So the birds have colonized all habitats today. We find them everywhere from the North Pole to the South Pole, and have also colonized a very large number of ecosystems. The importance of birds is at several points. First is the economic importance, especially as a source of food, because there are lots of birds that are consumed by humans, and wild birds are also sold. There is also the importance of the birds for the ecosystem, and that is what interests us the most.